Grandpa's voice boomed over the chatter of the surprise party, eyes wide with disbelief. "Buddy, why did you come by taxi? What happened to the Range Rover we gave you?" The room fell silent. Forks paused midair, conversations froze, and a few family members exchanged those subtle, judgmental looks that made you feel every ounce of shame before you even knew what you'd done. Elena Harper stood near the doorway, gripping the strap of her small leather bag, the smell of rain clinging faintly to her coat. She could feel every eye on her, burning, curious, and skeptical all at once. She took a slow breath, forcing a calm she didn't quite feel. The taxi that had brought her here was modest, nothing like the gleaming black Range Rover her grandfather, William Harper, had proudly handed over just a few months ago. The car had been meant to signify trust, status, success, a mark of belonging in a family that prided itself on wealth and appearances. But Elena didn't care about appearances anymore. Her mind drifted for a fraction of a second, back to the weeks before tonight. The subtle snickers, the sideways glances from cousins who always seemed to find ways to undermine her. And Nate, her cousin Nate, the charming golden boy of the Harper lineage, grinning as if he owned the world, never letting her forget that he could manipulate situations to his favor. The Range Rover, shiny and perfect, hadn't survived his little games. Elena had found out the hard way. Nate had sold it under the guise of handling some paperwork, leaving her with nothing but a hollow sense of betrayal. A sharp laugh from the other side of the room startled her. Clara Harper, Nate's mother, sipped her champagne with exaggerated delicacy, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly, as though she already assumed Elena would crumble. Elena forced a smile, holding her chin high, refusing to give anyone the satisfaction of witnessing her falter. Grandpa William, a man whose hands had built empires and whose eyes had softened only for his family, now looked torn between disbelief and disappointment. Elena could see the hurt in his gaze. It wasn't just about the car. It was about what the car represented, about trust and family pride. But what he didn't know yet was that Elena wasn't here to accept defeat. She stepped further into the room, heels clicking against the polished marble, each step echoing louder than it should. The chatter started to rise again, whispers weaving through the crowd like a restless wind. And Elena let them watch, let them wonder, let them doubt. They didn't know yet that this moment, the taxi, the ruined car, the raised eyebrows, was the spark that would set a fire no one in the Harper family could ignore. Tonight wasn't just a party. Tonight was the beginning of her reckoning. Before the party, everything in Elena's life had felt a little quieter, a little less complicated. She had been working long hours at her small design studio, trying to build something of her own without leaning on the Harper family name. The Range Rover her grandfather gave her had been the one luxury she allowed herself to enjoy. She treated it carefully, grateful for the trust behind the gift. Nate had shown up at her place one afternoon, smiling that easy smile he used whenever he wanted something. He always acted warm, always acted like the perfect cousin. But Elena had learned long ago that Nate's charm came with strings. Strings he expected everyone else to pull the way he wanted. He leaned against her doorway, hands in his pockets, acting like he owned the place. "Hey, Lena," he said in that familiar casual tone. "Grandpa wants me to handle some paperwork on the Rover. Just routine stuff. I'll take it in for you." Elena didn't question him. He was family. And despite the little moments, small comments, quiet digs, the times he made her feel like she didn't quite fit, she still wanted to believe he wouldn't actually hurt her. So she gave him the keys. She trusted him. Days passed. Then a week. Then 2. Every time she asked about the car, Nate had a new excuse ready. The dealer needed more time, or paperwork mix-up, or "Don't stress, Lena, I've got it handled." But something about his tone felt off. The more he talked, the more she felt that strange tug in her stomach, the one that whispered she was being played. One evening, when she finally pushed harder, Nate snapped just a little too quickly. "Why are you making a big deal out of this? It's a car, not a kidney." He said it with a laugh, but his eyes looked sharper than usual. That was when the first hints of gossip started drifting her way. A cousin mentioning Nate's bad habits, an aunt whispering that he was in trouble again, someone else hinting that he'd been gambling more than working. Elena didn't want to believe it, but the puzzle pieces were lining up faster than she could stop them. Her heart dropped the moment she learned the truth. She wasn't supposed to hear it. She had only walked into the Harper kitchen to grab coffee when she overheard Clara, Nate's mother, speaking in her usual clipped voice. "He sold it," Clara said. "He had no other choice. And Elena doesn't need something that nice anyway." Elena froze. For a moment she forgot how to breathe. They were talking about her car. The car Grandpa gave her. The one she trusted Nate with. Her stomach twisted with humiliation. Sold. Gone. And none of them cared about how it would make her look or feel. To them, it was just another thing Nate could take without consequence. Anger warmed her chest, slow but steady. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, sharp, and growing. And it was the first moment she realized Nate hadn't just Grandpa betrayed didn't her. raise his voice He had been often, undermining so when her he asked for Nate, years. What did
And
you
this
do?
time,
He went
too
the air in
far.
the house felt heavy. It happened in his study, the door halfway open, and Elena heard the tension in his tone, even though she couldn't see his face. Nate didn't answer right away. He tried to laugh it off, like he always did, but his voice cracked a little. That alone told Elena everything. Grandpa wasn't letting him slide this time. Clara Harper appeared almost immediately, like she had been waiting for trouble. She moved smoothly, always dressed perfectly, always ready to protect her son. Her voice was soft but sharp at the same time. "William, darling, you're misunderstanding." Nate was only trying to help. She placed a hand on Grandpa's arm, trying to guide him away from the topic, but Grandpa pulled away gently. He didn't trust her words, not today. Derek Harper, Elena's uncle, stood nearby with a worried look. Derek had always been kind to Elena, always careful with his words, the type of man who hated conflict but hated injustice even more. He didn't step into the argument, but the way he kept glancing at Elena told her he knew something was wrong, and he believed her long before she said a word. Soon enough, the rest of the family gathered in small groups around the living room. Some leaned in toward Clara and Nate, whispering that Elena must be dramatic, that she should have handled things quietly. Others looked at Elena with sympathy, offering small nods, little gestures that said, "We're with you, but we don't want trouble." It was like watching a line split straight down the middle of her own family. On one side were the ones charmed by Nate, people who liked his boldness, his flashy confidence, the way he talked like he had everything under control. On the other side were the quieter ones, the ones who saw something off but were too scared to speak against Clara, who ran the family's social image like it was her personal company. Elena stood alone near the window, feeling the divide settle like a weight in her chest. Even the people on her side didn't speak up loudly. They only supported her in silence, which somehow felt even lonelier. She realized no one was going to fight this battle for her. Not even Grandpa, who was still trying to figure out what the truth actually was. She had to protect herself. She had to think smarter, move carefully, and not let her anger push her into making mistakes Nate could use against her. While the family argued, Elena listened. She didn't mean to, but she overheard Clara's voice slip into a lower, worried tone. Something about numbers not adding up, and we can't afford another problem. It wasn't said for anyone else to hear. It was the kind of whisper that carried secrets. Money secrets. Elena didn't know exactly what it meant yet, but she knew this. Nate and Clara were hiding something much bigger than her missing car. And if she was going to survive this family mess, she needed to find out what it was. Elena didn't sleep much after the night of the party. The whispered conversations, the nervous glances, Clara's worried tone. All of it kept replaying in her mind. Something was wrong, and it was bigger than her missing car. So she decided she needed answers, even if she had to find them on her own. She started by going through old emails and documents Nate had once sent her. Most of them were harmless, but a few details didn't line up the way she remembered. There were messages where he had handled things for her, payments he claimed he made on her behalf, meetings he said he arranged but never confirmed. At first, she thought she was imagining things. But the more she looked, the more she realized she wasn't wrong. Something was off. She visited her bank the next morning, asking to see records for the business account she shared only with herself. When the manager brought the printouts, Elena felt her stomach twist. There were withdrawals she didn't recognize, large ones. Money taken out at odd times. And every time she traced one back, the trail ended somewhere connected to Nate. Sometimes it was an account under his name, sometimes under Clara's company. Her hands shook as she went through the pages. Nate hadn't just messed with her car. He had been slowly taking money that was supposed to help her build her business. Money she had saved. Money Grandpa had given her for support. Money she counted on. She felt something inside her crack a little. Nate had always played the favorite, always acted like he deserved more than everyone else. But she never imagined he would steal from her. She never imagined he would go this far just to keep her from standing on her own. The more she dug, the worse it got. She found out he had contacted potential clients behind her back, telling them she was unreliable or too inexperienced. He had canceled meetings she didn't even know she had scheduled. He had made her look weak in places she didn't even know she needed to protect. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. He didn't want her to succeed. He didn't want her to be independent. As long as she struggled, Nate looked better to the rest of the family. And Clara made sure nobody questioned him. Elena sat alone at her small dining table, papers spread out everywhere, her heart heavy. This wasn't just a cousin hurting her feelings. This was someone she grew up with, someone she trusted, someone she defended when others complained about him. And he had been cutting her down behind her back for years. A dark, quiet determination settled in her chest. She wanted to march straight into Nate's house and demand answers. She wanted to shout, but she forced herself to stay still. Confronting him now would only warn him. And someone who could do all this wouldn't hesitate to cover his tracks if he felt threatened. No, she needed to be smart. She needed proof. She needed a plan. And this time, she wasn't going to let him stay one step ahead. She knew rushing into a confrontation would only make things worse. Nate had influence, Clara had connections, and the two of them together could twist any situation to their advantage. She needed a plan that was careful and smart, something they wouldn't see coming. Her first move was taking back control of her money. She opened new accounts, changed every password she had, and set strict alerts with her bank. Every detail that had once been easy for Nate to slip into was suddenly locked behind layers he couldn't touch. It felt like rebuilding a wall that had been quietly broken for years. She then reached out to relatives who had shown small signs of sympathy during the party. None of them wanted loud drama, but many had soft complaints tucked away, moments when Nate had pressured them, borrowed money he never returned, or made choices that harmed them while Clara smoothed it all over. Their voices were quiet, but they gave her something she didn't have before: patterns. Evidence. A clearer picture of how long this had been happening. Her next step was contacting Marcus Reynolds, the one person outside the family she trusted completely. He had been her friend for years and later became her partner in business. When she told him everything, he didn't question a single thing. He simply sat beside her, looked over the paperwork, and said, "We'll figure this out." Together, they spent late nights sorting through every strange withdrawal, every canceled meeting, every message Nate had tampered with. Marcus helped her track down clients who had backed away from her business. A few explained that they were warned she was too overwhelmed, or unorganized, or unreliable. None of those words came from her. All of them traced back to Nate. Her anger grew, but so did her determination. Every new detail showed how deep his interference went. He hadn't just tried to make her look bad. He had tried to make her dependent, like someone who couldn't survive without the Harper family name. She realized he wanted her trapped in a corner where she couldn't rise above him. Her answer to that was simple. She would rise anyway. She didn't confront him. Not yet. Confrontation would give him time to hide things or twist the story. Instead, she made small moves, quiet moves. She corrected documents he had altered, reached out to business contacts he had scared away, and removed her funds from projects he had tried to control. Every careful step took power away from him without him noticing who was pulling the strings. Her confidence slowly returned as she watched her business stabilize and her finances fall back under her own control. For the first time in a long time, she felt steady on her feet. She wasn't just fixing the damage. She was preparing for something bigger, something that would end Nate's games for good. Her plan was only beginning. She waited for the right moment, watching the family settle around the long dining table. The conversation was light at first, filled with the usual jokes and small talk. Nate laughed louder than everyone, acting relaxed, almost smug, as if nothing in his life could ever fall apart. She watched him carefully, waiting for the opening she needed. Her chance came when Grandpa mentioned a small charity fund the family supported every year. He talked proudly about how everyone contributed. Nate nodded along, pretending to care, pretending to be responsible. That was when she spoke, her voice calm and gentle. She mentioned a small detail she had discovered in her quiet research. Just a small transfer, not large enough to cause instant scandal, but strange enough to catch attention. She said she noticed the fund was short a few $1,000s this year, and she wondered aloud if there had been a mix-up. Her tone was polite, almost innocent, but her words landed harder than she let on. The table went quiet. A few relatives glanced at Nate. He froze for a moment, his smile slipping before he caught himself. He tried to brush it off with a laugh, saying the charity must have used the funds early, or maybe there was a delay in reporting. But his voice didn't sound as smooth as usual. It wavered just enough for everyone to notice. Some family members exchanged uncertain looks. Others leaned back in their chairs, watching Nate more carefully than before. It was small, but the shift was real. For the first time, doubt touched his image. She kept her face neutral, pretending she hadn't meant anything by it. She acted as if she was only curious, nothing more. Inside, though, she felt a quiet spark of satisfaction. It wasn't triumph, not yet, but it was a beginning. A small hit, gentle and subtle, but just enough to make him nervous. He stared at her longer than he should have, eyes narrowing slightly. He was trying to figure out what she knew. His confidence cracked, even if only for a second. That tiny break in his composure was something she had never seen before, and it showed her he wasn't as untouchable as he acted. The rest of the dinner felt different. Nate no longer laughed as loudly. He stumbled over a few answers when relatives asked about his recent projects. He even dropped his fork once, something he would normally joke about, but this time he only muttered under his breath. He was thinking too much, worried too much. She kept her focus steady and played her part perfectly. She chatted softly with her uncle, complimented her aunt's cooking, and never once looked like someone who had carefully planned the moment that shook Nate's confidence. But inside, she felt a bittersweet relief. The betrayal still hurt. The lies still stung. Yet watching Nate feel the same discomfort he had caused her brought a quiet strength she hadn't felt in a long time. Her revenge had begun, not with shouting or chaos, but with one small truth dropped in the right place. And she knew he felt it. She found Nate alone near the back porch, the house mostly quiet except for distant voices. He didn't notice her at first, but when she stepped closer, he straightened like he sensed trouble. She held on to her emotions tightly, keeping her voice steady. He tried to greet her with a fake grin. "You look upset. Want to talk?" His tone carried the same fake concern he always used when he wanted control. She didn't answer. Instead, she slid a small stack of printed documents toward him. He took them with a confused frown, flipping through the pages until his face tightened. The numbers, the signatures, the transfers, all of it was in front of him. When he looked up, his smile was gone. She stayed quiet long enough for him to feel the weight of the evidence. Then she spoke, slow and calm, explaining what she had discovered. She told him how the missing funds matched his accounts, how certain transactions happened only when he had access, how the pattern pointed straight to him. Nate tried to interrupt, but she didn't stop. She told him she had also learned how he blocked her opportunities, how clients backed away after talking to him, how messages he sent caused real damage to her work. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried months of hurt. His expression shifted again, this time into irritation. He tossed the papers onto a nearby chair. "You don't understand what you're talking about," he said. "You're twisting everything. You always do this." She reminded him that the numbers weren't opinions. They were facts. And the clients weren't confused, they all said his name. That made him uncomfortable. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "Look," he said, "you're going to ruin your own reputation if you keep digging. This kind of thing doesn't help anyone. Let it go." She didn't move. She didn't raise her voice. She simply told him he had gone too far, and that the damage he caused wasn't something she could ignore. Her words were calm, but they hit him harder than shouting ever could. He tried changing tactics. "We're family," he said. "You don't want to start a war. People will take my side. You know they will." She didn't argue. She only watched him as he tried to find the right angle to shut her down. When he realized she wasn't reacting the way he expected, he grew uneasy. His confidence faded just enough to show the truth behind his act. She left the papers where they lay and turned away. He called after her, but she didn't respond. Her silence bothered him more than any accusation would have. As she walked toward the hallway, a cold ache filled her chest. The confrontation wasn't satisfying. It wasn't dramatic. It just hurt. Hearing him deny everything so easily showed her how little he cared. But beneath the pain, she felt a quiet strength building. The documents she showed him weren't the full set. She had more, far more, hidden safely away. And she planned to use them when the moment was right. The gathering was larger than usual, with relatives filling every corner of the house. Laughter echoed through the room, and people carried plates of food while catching up on old stories. No one expected anything unusual. No one felt the tension building quietly inside her. She stood near the center of the living room, holding a folder close to her chest. Her hands were steady this time. All the late nights, all the careful planning, all the fear. Everything had led to this moment. When Grandpa asked if anyone had something to share before dinner, she stepped forward. The room slowly quieted. She spoke clearly, letting her voice carry across the room. She said she needed to address something important, something involving the family's finances and her own business. A few people looked confused, others shifted uncomfortably. Nate, standing beside Clara, rolled his eyes like he was already bored. She opened the folder and revealed document after document. She explained where the missing money had gone. She explained how certain accounts had been touched by someone who never should have been near them. She explained how her business had been damaged by false messages and lies. For a moment, the room stayed silent. Then several relatives leaned forward, whispering, reading over the copies she handed out. The numbers were clear. The signatures were real. The trail pointed in one direction only. Nate. His face drained of color. He tried to laugh it off at first, saying she must have misunderstood. He claimed the documents were taken out of context. But even his voice couldn't pretend anymore. It trembled beneath the surface. She stayed calm and let the papers speak. Every line, every date, every signature showed exactly what he had done. Clara rushed forward before anyone else could react. She tried to blame confusion. She tried to blame stress. She even tried to blame her for misinterpreting things. But the relatives who had been quiet for years finally stepped in. One confirmed Nate owed him money. Another spoke about a deal Nate ruined. Another mentioned a strange payment that now made sense. Piece by piece, the picture formed clearly in everyone's mind. Nate wasn't a victim. He wasn't misunderstood. He had betrayed his own family for money and ego. Clara's voice cracked as she tried to keep control, but no one supported her. Even Grandpa, who always tried to protect peace, looked heartbroken as he stared at his grandson. The disappointment in his eyes was harder than any words he could have spoken. Nate's confidence collapsed. His shoulders dropped, and he stopped trying to talk himself out of anything. He looked around for someone to defend him, but no one stepped forward. Not even Clara, now that the truth was undeniable. She didn't smile. This wasn't about enjoying his downfall. It was about finally freeing herself from the lies he wrapped around her for years. The weight that had been sitting on her chest slowly lifted. Relatives who once doubted her approached with soft apologies. Uncle Derek placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, proud and relieved. Grandpa told her he admired her courage. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen. Her name wasn't tied to Nate's lies anymore. Her reputation wasn't damaged by his games. She had cleared her name in front of everyone who mattered. She had taken back her dignity. And this time, she wasn't letting anyone take it again. The house felt different the day after everything came out. The usual tension that followed family events wasn't there. Instead, people moved quietly, speaking in softer voices, almost as if they were trying to process everything at their own pace. She felt drained, but lighter than she had in months. Grandpa asked her to join him in the sunroom. He sat in his usual chair, hands folded, eyes warmer than she expected. When she stepped inside, he didn't give a long speech. He simply told her he was proud. Proud she stood up for herself. Proud she didn't let fear control her. Proud she handled the truth with strength. His words were simple, but they reached a place inside her that had felt ignored for years. He said he wished he had seen what was happening sooner. She told him he didn't need to apologize. The important part was that he believed her now. The small smile he gave her felt like a fresh start between them. News about Nate spread fast among the family. He stayed mostly out of sight, avoiding everyone. Whenever he came downstairs, relatives turned away or gave him cold, questioning looks. The charm he once used so easily no longer worked. Everyone had seen too much. Everyone knew too much. Even Clara couldn't shield him anymore. She tried for a while, insisting it was all a misunderstanding, but people stopped listening. Some relatives talked quietly about legal issues, especially since the missing funds involved more than just family money. No one knew exactly what would happen next, but one thing was clear: Nate couldn't hide behind excuses anymore. She didn't feel joy watching him fall apart. What she felt was closer to sadness, the kind that appears when something broken can't be fixed. But she didn't let that sadness weaken her. Not after everything she had gone through. Relatives who once doubted her treated her differently now. They looked at her with respect, not pity. They asked for her opinions. They apologized without being pushed. An aunt who rarely spoke to her approached her with a sincere hug, saying she admired the way she handled the situation. It was strange, having people look at her with trust instead of suspicion, but she slowly accepted it. She returned to her business with new confidence. Marcus helped her rebuild the parts Nate ruined, and together they planned new projects. It felt good to think about the future again instead of constantly looking over her shoulder. She told herself she wouldn't let anyone else control her path. Not anymore. Revenge had never been her final goal. She wanted truth. She wanted fairness. Now that she had it, she felt ready to focus on her own life again. But she also knew she would never be as open or trusting as before. Her guard would stay up, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. The fallout had changed everyone, but it changed her the most. She walked through the house feeling taller, steadier, and finally free. Her next chapter wasn't about fighting anymore. It was about living on her own terms. She left the house later that evening, needing a little quiet after everything that had happened. The air outside felt cooler, almost calming. She stood on the porch for a moment, letting herself breathe. The last few months played through her mind, not as painful flashes, but as pieces of a path she had somehow managed to walk all the way through. The betrayal had cut deep, but she understood something now. It had also pushed her to grow. She had learned to stand alone, to trust her own judgment, to stop shrinking just to keep peace in a family that didn't always treat her fairly. She didn't feel proud in a loud way. It was a softer feeling, steady and honest. Grandpa joined her outside. He walked slowly but stood tall beside her. For a moment they didn't speak. Then he looked at her with a small smile and said, "You came by taxi, but you arrived on your own terms." His voice carried warmth, not pity. It was his way of saying he finally saw her for who she had become. Not someone who needed rescuing, but someone who could rescue herself. She didn't need to explain anything. She just nodded, feeling his words settle in her chest. It was the kind of acknowledgement she had wanted for years, not because she needed approval, but because it meant her fight had been worth something. When she walked to the driveway, she didn't head toward the Range Rover. It wasn't hers anymore, and she didn't want it even if it magically reappeared. Instead, she got into a small, reliable car she had bought with her own hard-earned money. The seat felt familiar, and the engine's soft hum felt reassuring. Driving away, she didn't look back at the house. She kept her eyes on the road ahead, the streetlights stretching out like a quiet welcome. There was no dramatic ending, no rush of victory, just a sense of control she hadn't felt in a long time. She knew life wouldn't suddenly be perfect. There would still be challenges, still moments of doubt. But she also knew she could face them. She had done it once, and she could do it again. The road was hers now, and she was finally ready to follow it on her own terms.